Thanks, Bridget. As the session moderator for this, I will be managing the Q&A box, which is the icon labeled Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Questions for the panelists should be written in the Q&A box, and please enter your questions when invited to do so by the session host. Please note there will be we'll open the floor for a few questions later in the session. Now, let me introduce you to our host for this session. Dr. Martin Taylor is the Executive Director of the Canadian Research Data Centre Network, the founding president and CEO of Ocean Networks Canada, a member of the CCA panel on ocean science in Canada, and a past member of MEOPAR Research Management Committee. I will now let Martin lead this session.
Thank you very much, Casey. That's a real privilege for me today to be back in the ocean science community and to be privileged to chair this session with such a distinguished group. I guess my credibility here is really based in part on this document, which was produced several years ago by the Canadian Academies with regard to ocean science in Canada, meeting the challenge and seizing the opportunity. And I think that panel was anticipating what a CIOOS type organization in Canada could do, recognizing obviously that there was a long history in the US with CIOOS and initiatives elsewhere with IMOS and certainly European counterparts, and recognizing the fact obviously that Canada with 3 big oceans to steward and manage was a place where a CIOOS type of initiative was perhaps even overdue. So it's a real opportunity today to hear about the progress that's been made over these past few years since CIOOS was initiated and funded by MEOPAR and by DFO. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to Lydia Ross, who's going to give us an overview of CIOOS, a general introduction. Lydia comes to us as the engagement specialist with CIOOS Atlantic and the project officer for COIN Atlantic. So pass it over to you, Lydia.
Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Integrated Ocean Observing System, or CIOOS. My name is Lydia Ross, an engagement specialist with CIOOS Atlantic. I will be walking you through this introductory presentation for MEOPAR's annual scientific meeting. With advances in technology, we've very quickly moved from a time of data scarcity to a time of data plenty. These technological advancements have given operations the ability to collect incredible amounts of real-time coastal and ocean data on a daily, hourly, or even more frequent basis, allowing technicians and managers to make more informed decisions in our marine environments. Increasing discovery of and access to ocean sciences and data ensures Canadians can monitor health of fish farms, safely navigate through our coastal waters, maintain our coastal economies, and build resilient coastal infrastructure, enhancing the overall picture of what's happening in our changing marine ecosystems, and in turn enabling marine operations to adapt to these changing conditions. More data has been collected in our oceans in the past 2 years than ever before. In Canada, vast amounts of tidal buoys transmitting temperature, salinity, and current speeds, as well as a range of platforms, gliders, and instruments are being deployed across multiple sectors for project-based work, operational monitoring, regulatory requirements, and decision-making purposes. However, this data is often used in isolation by the source organization and/or for a limited time, shelved, stored, or otherwise improperly managed with no ability for others to discover, access, and reuse it. This data has minimal long-term value and often leads to a duplication of efforts simply from a lack of awareness that the data set exists. CIOOS aims to fill this gap by delivering a coordinated system that brings together and leverages existing Canadian and international coastal and ocean observation data. We feel that unless data can be shared, its full value cannot be realized. In today's digital economy, data is a kind of capital. Yet sharing data is not enough to realize this gain. The data must also be properly managed so that it can be discovered, accessed, and reused by future researchers to create a more comprehensive picture of our oceans. Ocean observing systems around the world are bringing to light this sea of data that has been obscured from those not directly involved in the research, just like I mentioned. By centralizing ocean data repositories into the Ocean Observing System, or CIOOS framework, possibilities for using these digital assets are growing. CIOOS has joined this international stage to contribute its coastal and ocean data to this global effort that continues to gain speed. Canada's Oceans of Data fills vital gaps in global observations through our work at higher latitudes and our enduring time series of coastal and ocean data collections. Our contributions are important to an CIOOS future where fair data, or data that is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, are widely available and well used to support sustainable ocean health and growth of our blue economy. In 2015, MEOPAR funded the development of the Ocean Data Management Community of Practice and Forum of expert participants from government, academia, and industry to offer perspectives and best practices around cyber infrastructure, observations, data, and visualizations, and to outline a shared vision for nationally coordinated ocean data management in Canada. In March of 2019, Fisheries and Oceans Canada invested $1.5 million per year to advance the development of the Canadian Integrated Ocean Observing System, jointly funded by MEOPAR, who provided $2 million over 4 years to increase the availability of ocean data to Canadians, and in turn, inform science-based decisions surrounding the responsible and efficient use of our ocean environment. During our Phase 2 funding from 2020 until 2022, the regional associations and various teams, which I'll cover shortly, will build off of the tools and processes that have served as the foundation of CIOOS and cooperatively work to expand the data dissemination system, cyber infrastructure, data access and visualization tools, as well as national communications and engagement efforts. CIOOS was designed to foster coordination and collaboration among diverse data contributors, improve access to bilingual coastal and ocean information for decision-making, and enable discovery and access to data to support a wide variety of applied and theoretical ocean and coastal research efforts to better understand, monitor, and manage activities in Canada's oceans. Ultimately, our vision is to offer a fully integrated, sustainable ocean observing system that maximizes access to data and advances the generation of coastal and ocean information products for the benefits of all Canadians. CIOOS strives to reduce duplication. Where possible, we adopt nationally recognized standards, technology, and solutions, adapt where necessary, and develop as a last resort. This includes scalable and interoperable open source software and tools for data assembly, management, quality control, and dissemination of essential ocean variables and other key variables of regional importance. Cost-effective cyber infrastructure and hardware that are fit for purpose and scalable for future needs, value-added data visualizations tools that promote data discovery and access by end users, and finally, building relationships through engagement between existing partners and new connections through coordinated outreach. CIOOS is comprised of governing bodies and various reporting structures. The Executive Committee ensures consistency across CIOOS National and the 3 regional associations located in the Pacific, St. Lawrence, and the Atlantic. These RAs ensure strong representation from the varied local oceanographic stakeholders involved with CIOOS, such as contributors and users of the CIOOS system. Communications and technical committees report regularly to the Executive Committee for decisions and approvals and have developed task teams to address specific tasks. The system plans to grow to additional areas such as the Arctic Inuit Nunangat and the Great Lakes. Northern expansion is particularly important owing to the designation of an Arctic Ocean region by DFO in partnership with and under the leadership of Inuit Nunangut. The Executive Committee ensures consistency across standing committees, who play an advisory role and coordinate their respective objectives across our regional and national teams. For example, the Technical Committee provides oversight and coordination of all of the technical aspects of CIOOS by initiating, coordinating, and monitoring the technical task teams' mandates and deliverables, and liaisons between the Executive Committee and the CIOOS technical community. The Communications Committee raises the national and international awareness, profile, and brand recognition of CIOOS, its regional associations, partners, data contributors, as well as funders. It increases the number of CIOOS data contributors and users through a national newsletter, social media, and other promotional materials, and grows CIOOS as a reputation as a go-to place to discover and access high-quality coastal and ocean data and products, and for receiving support from knowledgeable staff. The Science Committee advises on key aspects of existing and proposed essential ocean variables. The task teams work on various objectives in smaller numbers to improve the efficiency in advancing specified tasks, such as the metadata standards and practices, solution architecture, user experience, data visualizations, and data management plan. The collaborative development teams advance the development of technical components of CIOOS collaboratively across all RAs, including the data integration process and metadata catalog function. The internal guts of CIOOS, however, can be summed up in this diagram: 3 regional associations that feed into a single national portal. Note the external connections, specifically the path through which data users and data contributors interact with CIOOS. Users through the national or regional web portals, and contributors who work directly with their regional associations. Ultimately, CIOOS works across sectors to unite the knowledge, expertise, and cyber infrastructure of Canada's ocean observing community through our online platform for sharing, discovering, and accessing open ocean and coastal data from across 3 regions in Canada. Data that is integrated into CIOOS will be visible both regionally and nationally and attributed back to the originator using our CC BY open data licensing. CIOOS's knowledgeable staff are ready to help you manage your ocean observing data to meet internationally recognized standards and increase the reusability and long-term value of your work. Each regional association has its own web portal and tools that will allow contributors to share coastal and ocean data and users to search and filter and visualize these data sets, facilitating easy discovery and access of data in that region. All RAs have the same requirements for data, so formats and standards are consistent nationally. So what does this all mean for you as researchers or operators? With discoverable data, one can better understand the ocean observing activities happening in your waters, helping to form a more complete picture of our coasts and oceans and reduce duplication of work. Why repeat work when you can focus on something new and exciting? Dive into Canada's oceans of data today. Reach out to learn more and get started. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lydia. And what we're going to do is have now, based on that overview, is an introduction to each of the work of each of the regional associations, and then we'll turn to our panel for an interactive session. So next then, let's turn first to the Pacific Regional Association, and we've got a presentation from Jonathan Kellogg, who is responsible for science communications at the Hakai Institute.
Hello, MEOPAR. My name is Jonathan Kellogg, and I'm a science communications coordinator with the Hakai Institute and part of the CIOOS Pacific communications team. Like our partners across the country, CIOOS Pacific has a distinctive regional landscape to ocean observations in the past, present, and future. In this presentation, I'll be highlighting our strengths in the Pacific region and where we are looking to go. I'll begin today with the geographic and socioeconomic characteristics of the region that distinguish the Pacific from the Atlantic coast. Then I'll describe the development of the Pacific Regional Association, some of the successes that we have had, and how we're transitioning from a period exploring the feasibility to a new phase where we're improving the utility of what has been built and are expanding engagement with potential partners. CIOOS Pacific's Regional Association aggregates data from Canada's west coast. Compared to the east coast, this is a rather convoluted coastline. A straight line from Victoria in the south to Prince Rupert in the north is about 800 kilometers long. But with all the fjords, inlets, and islands, the coastline stretches an impressive 20,000 kilometers. Also, unlike the east coast, the continental shelf out west is very narrow, less than 45 kilometers in most regions before the seafloor plunges to a depth of 2,500 meters and beyond. These features lead to an ocean-observing landscape that is seeking to characterize a coast made up of diverse pockets of deep waters that have restricted connectivity with the open Pacific, even if a relatively short distance away. Marine communities cover this coastline, but particular issues facing them aren't very regionally. British Columbia's major cities in the south are dominated by marine issues relating to shipping, transportation, and habitat degradation that affects the endangered southern resident killer whales. Moving north, the remote central coast is home to many fish farms, and along the north coast, shipping is again a major industry as large ships ply the rough seas and rocky coastline. Along the entire coast, concerns for salmon and its influence on fishing and tourism abound. Ocean acidification and marine heat waves are of growing concerns for aquaculture farmers and First Nations communities alike as they draw a living on the coastal ocean that is undergoing so much change. Monitoring efforts in these waters have been ongoing since the 1950s, and indeed the Pacific region is home to the longest continuous monitoring in the world at Ocean Station Papa. Today, there are several universities, colleges, NGOs, and federal departments that are all actively engaged in studying the marine environment. These efforts don't stop at the border with the American Ocean Observing Systems of CIOOS, the Alaska Ocean Observing System to the north, and NANOOS, the Northwest Association of Networked Ocean Observing Systems in Washington and Oregon to the south. CIOOS Pacific brings together the expertise of three major ocean data providers on the West Coast: Ocean Networks Canada, the Hackeye Institute, and the Fisheries and Oceans Institute of Ocean Sciences, and it is hosted at the University of Victoria. Throughout the prototype phase, we worked with the other regions to agree upon essential ocean variables, standards for metadata, data packaging, and data transport as datasets were identified for early ingestion into the system. Our work has been collaborative with the inclusion of senior staff from Ocean Networks, Hackeye, and the Institute of Ocean Sciences, regularly meeting to assess progress as part of our Regional Oversight Committee. At these meetings, there were important updates and discussions about how to address sticking points in the development process. Recently, we also welcomed Dr. Jan Newton, the Director of NANOOS to our south, to our Regional Oversight Committee, and we welcome her guidance and experience. After just over a year, our efforts bore fruit, and CIOOS Pacific went live in March of 2020 with the rest of the CIOOS sites. It demonstrated the feasibility of accessing these diverse data types from multiple organizations in the Pacific region and making them discoverable under the same architecture as used by SLGO and our Atlantic partners. Datasets for ingestion were identified within the holdings of our organizations and are examples of key monitoring activities. A jewel among these early ingested datasets are those from iOS, and specifically from LimeP. Previously, those data were available to researchers behind a password-protected DFO site called Water Properties that many of you may be familiar with, but they have now undergone a transformation into the CIOOS compliant format that makes them searchable and more publicly available to all Canadians. This amounts to over 100,000 individual files, widely distributed along the coast as shown here, that have been integrated onto the server and are now available through CIOOS. Transformation of additional datasets into CIOOS is ongoing as we continue to streamline the process. We're also developing 4 data-driven applications geared towards understanding marine heat waves, ocean climate, marine conditions for growing shellfish, and currents in the Strait of Georgia, a key waterway for shipping on the South Coast. Each of these applications has a different target audience, and we have tailored data visualizations to meet end user needs. These pages continue development, and as they're moving forward, we're planning further applications. First among these will be a data visualization tool geared towards scientists looking to do an initial analysis during their data discovery. Now that we've proven this collaboration can work, we're turning our focus towards making it useful for all Canadians. We're working to improve the user experience in this phase. By making it easier to discover, access, and download the data, we'll make CIOOS a place that users want to come to discover Canada's ocean of data. In the site, the user will find even more valuable monitoring from the Pacific, including modeling output, data from additional partners, and more essential ocean variables, including biological parameters. A key piece to making CIOOS Pacific a success moving forward will be gaining engagement from the marine community. Both Ocean Networks Canada and Hakai Institute have extensive networks across the region with First Nations, industry, nonprofits, and coastal communities. Both organizations are working together to advance engagement with First Nations and plan for long-term partnerships. We're also now a member of the Association of British Columbia Marine Industry, or ABCMI, the leading industry association in the province with over 200 members. And we just recently participated in the Ocean Futures Innovation Hub workshop, a new economic incubator developing in Victoria. These collaborations will help us to grow and to meet the needs across the region. As we do, we look forward to hearing from you in the community about how we may improve our offerings to meet future needs. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you, Jonathan. So we're going to move now from the West Coast to the East Coast. And our presentation for the Atlantic Regional Association comes from Shayla Fitzsimmons, the Executive Director of CIOOS Atlantic. So over to Shayla.
Good afternoon. My name is Shayla Fitzsimmons, and I'm the Executive Director of CIOOS Atlantic. Before we really dig into who we are and what we do as a regional association, I'd like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the territory on which CIOOS Atlantic is situated, the ancestral unceded homeland of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. I'd also like to recognize the Mi'kmaq, Beothuk, Passamaquoddy, and Maliseet, as well as the Inuit of Dasinam and the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatavut as the original caretakers of the oceans in which CIOOS Atlantic works. Unlike the approach taken in the Pacific and the Gulf of St. Lawrence, where one or two organizations have formed the basis of the regional association, in Atlantic Canada, we formed a consortium of partner institutions. The Ocean Frontier Institute, the Fisheries and Marine Institute of Memorial University of Newfoundland, the Coastal and Ocean Information Network Atlantic, Dalhousie University, the Ocean Tracking Network, and the Memorial University of Newfoundland. As the Atlantic Regional Association, CIOOS Atlantic is responsible for engaging partners and integrating data from the Canadian Atlantic seaboard, specifically the Bay of Fundy, the east coast of Nova Scotia, the east coast of Newfoundland, and the coast of Labrador. These coastlines are dotted with innumerable inlets and islands and headlands and harbors and measure more than 15,000 kilometers in length. Not only that, the rich coastal and offshore waters of this area are home to two major ports and multiple resource-rich areas of significant ecological and biological importance, including the Scotian Shelf, Grand Banks, and of course, the Bay of Fundy. In Atlantic Canada, our way of life is closely tied to the ocean, and to these sensitive marine ecosystems that are vulnerable to harm from human activities. It's our responsibility as a region and as a nation to protect this valuable resource while also bolstering sustainable ocean use so that Atlantic Canadians can continue to share a deep connection to the ocean for generations to come. In line with this, the overarching philosophy of CIOOS Atlantic is to develop a system that is not only consistent with CIOOS nationally, but which also meets the unique needs of our local oceanographic community and our broad range of end users, everyone from researchers to Indigenous and coastal communities. It is you, as both contributors and users of ocean observations, that are key to creating the important feedback loop that's necessary for CIOOS Atlantic to grow and to be responsive to regional needs. Truly, the real power of CIOOS Atlantic is in the partnerships. We can't do it without each and every one of you. So unsurprisingly, multi-sectoral engagement that is both meaningful and ongoing is an important component of our work. To date, our engagement activities have included significant outreach to Indigenous governments, organizations, and communities, where we are committed to building meaningful and respectful relationships. To further explore the potential for partnership, CIOOS Atlantic applied for and received funding from the Ocean Frontier Institute Seed Fund, which was jointly funded with Canada's Ocean Supercluster, for a two-part project consisting of a literature review and a discussion series. The literature review aimed to develop an understanding of how traditional ecological knowledge can be successfully digitized and utilized alongside Western scientific systems, and examines the factors that enable successful outcomes along with the inherent risks and limitations. This report is available on the CIOOS Atlantic website under resources, so if you're interested, I encourage you to check it out. The three-part discussion series, currently planned for early 2021, will be based on the findings in the literature review and will explore potential next steps and future actions for knowledge sharing through co-building. We've also engaged extensively with industry, primarily through Canada's Ocean Supercluster, and are excited to be collaborating with them to host a virtual Ocean Data Connector series this fall. This three-part series will explore the data management needs and concerns of Supercluster members and outline strategies for working together into the future. Underlying the power of partnerships is the need to make as much data available online as possible so that useful and informative data products can be created in response to the expressed desires of our user community. A priority task during our current phase of CIOOS Atlantic is therefore the integration of data sets from a variety of sources across all sectors. As of the time of this recording, data from 7 different contributors is available via CIOOS Atlantic. Of particular note is the marine plastics data from Coastal Action, an NGO active in Nova Scotia. Although this variable is not yet widely supported by the national CIOOS system, it is an area of growing interest in Atlantic Canada and nationwide. And in keeping with our philosophy of supporting regional interests, we were keen to work with Coastal Action and in turn support the findability and accessibility of marine plastics data. In the near future, our priorities for data integration include biological specimen and CTD data from DFO and data from FORCE, the Fundy Ocean Research Center for Energy. A lot of effort has also gone into securing additional funding for projects above and beyond our current deliverables. Over the past 18 months, we've applied for 7 funding opportunities, and of these, 2 were successful and 3 are still under deliberation by the various review committees. If funded, these projects would provide us the resources to integrate additional data into CIOOS, to better understand how human behaviors impact open data sharing, and to develop user-driven data products, which is something that's been requested from a number of sources. All of these would advance both CIOOS Atlantic and CIOOS as a national system and would allow us to better serve the ocean observing community in Canada. Looking forward, CIOOS Atlantic will continue to pursue projects that advance our philosophy while also working to align ourselves and with regional and national priorities. Ocean observations are the backbone of critical ocean and weather forecasts, providing invaluable information that support the sustainability and economic value of our oceans in support of the blue economy and the industries it encompasses, such as marine transportation and aquaculture. The latter is of particular importance for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, and CIOOS Atlantic has been and will continue to foster relationships with Atlantic aquaculture organizations to support their often data-intensive processes and to help these organizations and others understand how the effects of climate change, such as ocean warming or ocean acidification, are affecting their operations, and with that understanding to better adapt. CIOOS Atlantic will also continue to integrate marine plastics data, assisting researchers and policymakers in monitoring the effect of the Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. In fact, we've already committed to providing data management support to Coastal Action for a new marine plastics project set to run from 2020 to 2023. Ultimately, CIOOS Atlantic is seeking to support our regional and national partners across all sectors and to contribute to an open, transparent, and engaged oceanographic community. Although many of our activities are focused on the Atlantic region, CIOOS Atlantic staff also contribute to a multitude of national teams and committees, and our efforts and experiences are shared freely with our national colleagues and are ultimately aimed at advancing CIOOS as a national system. It's been an exciting and busy couple of years since this project kicked off, and none of this work would be possible without the commitment and dedication from our CIOOS Atlantic staff, our in-kind partners, our regional and national partners, and our funders, MEOPAR and DFO. If you'd like to learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we would be happy to hear from you.
So thank you very much, Shayla. And now we're going to turn to our third regional association, namely the Gulf of Lawrence, St. Lawrence Regional Association, as well as hosting the national web presence. And in this case, our presenter is Anne-Sophie Saint-Marie, who's Manager of Partnerships and Communications at the St. Lawrence Global Observatory. Over to you, Anne-Sophie.
Hi, my name is Anne-Sophie Saint-Marie, and I'm the manager at the St. Lawrence Global Observatory, or SLGO, for partnerships and communications. I will present today for both the St. Lawrence Regional Association and the national web presence of CIOOS. First of all, I want to explain why I'm talking about SLGO and what is the difference with the CIOOS RA for the St. Lawrence. Well, there is no difference, they are the same. So SLGO was created in 2005 from federal and provincial departments together as well with academic institutions to address the data sharing issues that were present and are still present today in our region. The goal was to create an independent organization that would provide integrated, timely, and open access to data of the St. Lawrence from its river all the way to the Gulf. So from 2005, it was already a regional association. So naturally, in 2018, when CIOOS began to be developed, SLGO just naturally became the regional association for the St. Lawrence. Building from an existing organization has prevented duplication of efforts and has built over years of outreach. With SLGO now working with 45 members and 35 of which are currently sharing data with us. So we are already well established with stakeholders, and we enjoy a visibility that has only increased rather significantly since we've become the CIOOS RA. With more than 200,000 visits on our website last year. To become the CIOOS RA, it did ask quite some work from us, such as the migration of our previous website into the new CIOOS look and feel. So that meant a migration of 300 pages and more than 1,000 files that were built over the past 15 years. So it was a big move up. Our team has also increased a lot with 5 new employees in the last year only, which required a fair amount of training and adaptation too, in addition to the COVID challenges. Becoming the CIOOS RA also meant to take an active role in all of the CIOOS working groups and committees. As you can see, there are quite a few, and we take active part in all of them, as well as chairing some of those. And last but not least, but we've increased our engagement with existing partners, explaining what would be our new role as the CIOOS RA, what it would mean for them, etc., as well as expand our outreach to less visited regions. So, for example, in 2019, we did a tour specifically in New Brunswick as a first introduction to CIOOS as well as SLGO. So when we talk about existing partners, what do we mean? Over the years, SLGO has built a partnership and more specifically, a membership. So yes, we have a membership system, and this page illustrates our active members, which are organizations that provide data on our portal. You can see the variety of organization types, from academia to federal and provincial departments, to conservation agencies and indigenous communities as well. We also have associate members who actually support our mission and contribute in different ways. One example would be developing a specific tool, say a dashboard with some chosen variables that would meet a specific need that an associate members would have. And then we work collaboratively to address their needs. Another example of collaborative work that we do with our partners is for their data management. So depending on their needs and their internal capacity, which varies a lot, as we've seen from the member types that we have, we can help at various points in the data life cycle. So it could be from the very start, which is developing a database before data collection, or it could be quality control and adapting existing data to the international standards that we use at SLGO and CIOOS. Or it could also be developing an overall data management plan that would allow the data to follow the FAIR principles, which ensure that the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So once the data is standardized, we can display it in different ways on our portal. If you remember, the mission of SLGO is to provide integrated data on its centralized portal. So the first step of that is archiving the data sets into our catalog. The regional associations catalog are connected on the CIOOS national portal also. So it can be harvested by any other catalogs working with the same standards. So that is the first entry point of data in SLGO. Following that, we have a variety of visualization tools, for example, or applications that we have developed with our members to meet their specific needs. I will show some examples in the following slides, but what to remember from here is that we have quite a few. But what is interesting is that within most of these applications, there's a multitude of data sets in them from different providers. So it really serves the goal to integrate data together, to make them discoverable, and one data set brings visibility to another. For example, the biodiversity app, it integrates more than 1 million records regarding more than 320 species that are living in the St. Lawrence ecosystem. And that data is coming from federal departments' annual surveys or one-time study by a single university, also from citizen science apps. And of course, they are all clearly identified as such. So if you filter by species of fish, or you can filter by invasive species, for example, then you truly navigate between all those data sources. And this is by definition is integration of data for better ecosystem-based management, which is necessary for a system as complex as the St. Lawrence. Okay, another example of visualization tool that we've developed at SLGO is the application Marine Conditions and Ocean Forecast. Sorry, two different applications. Marine Condition lives in the real time, while Ocean Forecast, as you might have guessed, is in the future with the forecast of water level, current, temperature, and sea ice. I have two more screenshots of the Marine Condition apps with layers here of the DFO scientific buoys updated every 3 minutes and also from Environment Canada's weather station that are updated every 15 minutes. So as you can see, it has a lot of features. One of them is a dashboard that we've created for the Port of Montreal, one of our associate members, where they wanted to be able to select specific variables from different stations to, in one click, basically see what they're interested in and see the data in real time. So that concludes for the SLGO part of my presentation. And as a recap, we've been established since 2005. And in fact, we will be celebrating our 15th anniversary this year. And we have recently became now the St. Lawrence Regional Association for CIOOS. For our future work, in addition to the work in CIOOS task teams, we focus next year on improving and expanding our outreach, our communication, and adapting to the fact that these activities will likely happen virtually rather than face-to-face. Speaking of face, here we are. So this is a picture of our beautiful team. Like I said at the very beginning of our presentation, SLGO also deals with the roles of the national web presence. So what is the national web presence? Let's overview the achievement of phase 1 to understand what it has been doing. So in the phase 1, the national web presence has developed the common look and feel between the 3 regional associations, the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the St. Lawrence, and the national website. So that means the logo, the brand guide, the website patterns, and everything. It has also been doing participation in events and representation in different events, like this picture has been taken at the Ocean Hubs 19, where we represented CIOOS. And on the website itself of the national, so if you just go on CIOOS.ca, there's a web page that is actually an aggregation of the metadata coming from all of the 3 regional associations. So it allows them to be found at the national level, but then redirected on the regional websites for the actual data set, for the actual data access. So you can find the data set on the national, but then you can go deeper on the region's websites. So in the next steps, in addition to improvements on the website and managing the software infrastructure and cloud hosting, CIOOS is looking at developing visualization tools for the whole of CIOOS data. The national web presence will make sure that as things evolve, that we keep a common look and feel with annual audit reports. And finally, through user feedbacks analysis, we want to identify future needs from our users to better plan for phase 3 of CIOOS. So speaking of user feedback, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out to us, whether you have data to share or have inquiries on accessing some type of data. Do not hesitate. We want to create a system close to its users' needs. And I would like to thank MEOPAR for the opportunity to do just that today with you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Anne-Sophie. And having now heard the presentations from the 3 regional associations, I think we're getting a greater appreciation for the breadth and depth of the data that have been available historically, but now, of course, are being then added to currently and going forward. And that's perhaps a segue to our last presentation before we turn to our panel. And this is from Ray Brunsting. Ray is the Chief Technology Officer at the HackEye Institute. And Ray is going to present the data stewardship node. Over to Ray.
Hi, my name is Ray Brunsting, and it is my pleasure to speak with you today about how the data stewardship node fits into CIOOS. Before I get started, let me share a bit about myself. I'm recording this presentation from my home office in Waterloo, Ontario. Work-wise, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the HackEye Institute, where I oversee technology and data management. Within CIOOS, I enjoy working with Mike Smith from CIOOS Atlantic as co-chair of the CIOOS Technical Committee. I also enjoy working closely with my BC colleagues from the Pacific RA. Let me start by telling you a bit about HackEye and how HackEye fits into CIOOS. HackEye is a scientific research organization based in British Columbia. HackEye has a number of research programs that blend science and technology to better understand the coastal margin of British Columbia and beyond. Areas of scientific research and innovation include oceanography, ocean food webs, habitat mapping, genomics, and data integration. HackEye works with collaborators from academic, government, and international research organizations, including CIOOS. As illustrated here, HackEye is involved both regionally and nationally at CIOOS. At a regional level, HackEye works closely with Ocean Networks Canada, DFO, and others to support the Pacific Regional Association, as you heard today. At a national level, HackEye helps meet current CIOOS requirements while also working on longer-term initiatives that are not yet within the scope of CIOOS. This additional work is typically related to areas of research and development that are likely to become important areas for CIOOS in the coming years. Let me explain a bit about how the data stewardship node is helping to build CIOOS today. Through participation in committees, task teams, and collaborative development teams, the data stewardship node contributes to the design and implementation of CIOOS. More specifically, and together with the RAs and national web presence, the data stewardship node helps use standards and technologies like GitHub, CCAN, ERDAP, Docker, and NetCDF to build data catalogs, websites, and data products. The data stewardship node manages the CIOOS open source code repository and contributes to the development of software components used across RAs and the national web presence. As we look towards the future, CIOOS will support additional data types from a growing and diverse group of data providers, while making ocean data and data products available to a broad and diverse set of researchers, data users, and others. In CIOOS Phase 2, efforts are underway to integrate biological data sets that are compatible with evolving global standards and best practices. The data stewardship node is working with Opus and CIOOS colleagues to help figure out how to best do this. Genomics will become increasingly important to CIOOS over time. Together with First Nation partners, HackEye is using eDNA to measure biodiversity along the BC coast and how biodiversity changes over time. As part of this initiative, HackEye is sharing genomic information with global DNA databases and exploring ways to analyze genomic information in the context of ocean data that is already available in CIOOS. We anticipate that this work will inform and guide future efforts to integrate genomics into CIOOS. That's all for now. I hope that helps you understand a bit about how the data stewardship node fits into CIOOS, and I look forward to hearing from you during the panel discussion.
So thank you very much, Ray. And at this point, we're transitioning from what you will have gathered were the pre-tape portions now to the live Q&A. And I'm going to start off in a few minutes asking some questions in advance of those that will have come in through the chat box. But before we get to the questions, let me introduce the panel and then set the context for our discussion very briefly. So with us today are Ray Brunsting, who you've just heard from as Chief Technology Officer at the HackEye Institute. Welcome, Ray. Denis Damour, who is Executive Director of CIOOS Pacific. Denis, welcome. Shayla Fitzsimmons, Shayla being the Executive Director of CIOOS Atlantic. Welcome, Shayla. And Anne-Sophie Saint-Marie, the Manager of Partnership and Communications at the St. Lawrence Global Observatory. So thank you, all of you, for joining us from your respective homes and offices today, as we do. It's a fascinating time to be able to link in this way, and we make obviously full advantage of it. As I said at the outset, perhaps a context for both thinking about CIOOS and as a lead into some of the questions that I will pose to our panelists in just a moment, is that 2013 Council on Canadian Academies report. As I mentioned, I had the privilege of being part of that panel based on my role previously with Ocean Networks Canada. And those of you who are familiar with the report may remember that at the conclusion, we identified three major gaps that it appeared to the panel were ones that Canada should pay specific attention to and try to fill those gaps. Most broadly, there was a vision gap. Did we have a real sense of the stewardship responsibility that we had with these three major oceans, the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Arctic, literally on our coastlines? There was a coordination gap that we were well aware, of course, that there were all sorts of organizations, both within government, within the private sector, and of course within our universities and the academic sector, dealing in all kinds of ways, very important ways, with the dynamics of the ocean, data related to the ocean, ocean change, etc. The biology, the chemistry, the physics, all of that was being in various ways examined, and yet perhaps not coordinated in the way that took maximum advantage of what was happening through those various organizations, both regionally and nationally. Not only was there a vision gap and a coordination gap, as we saw it as a panel, but also an information gap. So notwithstanding the fact that historically and at that time and still now, a lot of data, both in terms of breadth and in terms of depth of the data being collected, nevertheless, there were information gaps, that there was certain information that we felt could and should be collected. And there were some new kids on the block in terms of organizations that were well placed to do that, including organizations like the one I was previously with at Ocean Networks Canada. So there was a context, therefore, for thinking about the ways in which, as a country, as geographically large and as diverse as we are, we could all the better take advantage of the data that had been collected and look to better ways to actually then collect new data and coordinate it in a way that then both a vision and an information gap were fulfilled. So that's the context, and that's where I'd like to start with the panel. And we've got several questions that I'm going to invite a lead-off person to respond to. And then, of course, our other panelists should by all means feel free to contribute. And while we're doing that, please, those of you who are in the audience, and I see we've got quite a lot of people online, please take advantage of the Q&A box to post your own questions, and we will try to get to as many of those as we can. And we're doing reasonably well for time, so we've got to think about 35 minutes between questions that start us off, as well as those you will pose to us through the Q&A. So if I could, first of all, Anne-Sophie, turn to you and raise the question, given what we've just seen through these various presentations of the regional associations and the data stewardship organization, how far in relation to those gaps, vision, coordination, information, do you think CIOOS so far has brought us? So, Anne-Sophie, over to you, and then I'm going to invite others to add their own comments. Anne-Sophie, please.
Thank you, Martin. So I think that especially after all the 3Rs presentation and even before that, the ORCA presentation as well, I think it's clear in this session now that Canada's ocean science is incredibly diverse and diverse in a lot of different meanings. It's different coastal cultures, it's different resources and biological diversity, it's climate extremes, and its political landscape with several levels of jurisdiction, with bodies of water that sometimes are shared with multiple Canadian provinces, but also the states. It's French and English as official languages. And because it's so complex and multi-scale, it does make sense that ocean science in Canada is divided in a wide range of diverse organizations. And the CCA report warns about that. And the gaps come from this warning for collaboration and coordination and information gap. And I'm glad that you mentioned the information gap, Martin, because in addition to that, I think there's a challenge of data discoverability and availability, especially, of course, with data coming from researchers that are publicly funded and that should be made openly available. So there's an additional challenge to develop a unified and interoperable data sharing tools to support the integration of all those data types throughout the country. And in doing so, help to develop a comprehensive understanding of the oceans. And it has taken a greater significance in the past couple of years with the increasing interest of open data philosophy, the FAIR principles, and integrated management approaches such as marine spatial planning, for one example. And the good thing is that CIOOS does just that. It's a national initiative, but it's built from regional associations that themselves are working very closely with this wild diversity of regional organizations that have their own regional expertise. And it integrates their data, increasing in that way their visibility and thus their reusability. And we also wanted CIOOS to be adaptive for future evolution and to be flexible enough for innovation in a way to keep Canada as a leader in the world of ocean observing systems. So I know it sounds obvious, but the best way to do that for CIOOS was to be deeply implanted regionally with the 3 starting regions that I've presented today, and we will build hopefully on these regions for further down the road as CIOOS evolves and develops. And we harvest and showcase and integrate at the national level. Of course, like as I mentioned in my national web presentation, we have a national portal, CIOOS.ca. But there's a national integration more behind the scenes, and it's in all of the committees that were presented and that are composed of members of all the regional groups. And being standardized, integrated at the national level, that's what makes it so much easier to connect with other national CIOOS and international initiatives. So how far did CIOOS bring us? CIOOS is creating a system that is by definition, that it allows room at the table of discussion for always more regional expertise voices as they're developed, as they respond to critical needs. Ocean plastic pollution, Sheila mentioned, is a great example for any kind of ocean knowledge. And to achieve that, there's kind of 2 parts. CIOOS has done tremendous work in outreach and communication so far, to connect with the regional stakeholders, to make CIOOS known, to invite people to take part in the system, to review the work that is done so far. We really wanted to be close to the users' needs in the end. And it's really important to have this conversation regularly to adapt the system that we're developing, not in silos, but in the direct response of what the partners need. Whether it's functionalities in the system, data visualization tools, training in data management. Even there's also some concerns in security and privacy concerns, but it's all kinds of conversations that we need to keep having. In addition to outreach, and this is my last
last part of the answer. There's a lot of technical giant steps that have been realized to make sure that machine-to-machine communication can be established. And we wanted to make sure that the cyber infrastructure that would support CIOOS, it would not cause at least the less that as possible, to not cause technological barriers down the road. So we had to seek best practices from the US CIOOS, from GOOS, etc.
That's great, Anne-Sophie, thank you. I'm going to invite Denis, Shayla and Ray to add some comments here. And I think you picked up on one of the issues certainly that I was wanting to hear and glad to hear, which is the nature of the communications that have been ongoing and how those are built into the structure of CIOOS between the different regional associations. So that while obviously each regional association builds on its own particular context and its own strengths and issues, there is obviously this transfer of information across the whole network. So picking up on that point, Denis, Shayla, Ray, any points to add on how far so far CIOOS has brought us?
Well, on that point, this is Ray. So just wholeheartedly agree with that. It's interesting, when we started phase one, we were sort of, funding was floated in I think September or something, but we really didn't get rolling until we were all together in person in January of, I guess, 2019 now. And so the reason we did that, because we really wanted to get together in person, ironically, thankfully we could do it back then, and really build that community and get that community off and going. It's been a lot easier since then because we did that. Therefore, it has maintained, that started off in a good footing, and we maintained a lot of that collaboration and discussion, and as you pointed out, the organizational structure sort of helped that, monthly executive committee meetings, technical committee meetings, all these groups meeting together regularly, so we've been able to maintain that. So unfortunately, we probably would have had, we were hoping to have an annual meeting face-to-face, co-located probably with the MEOPAR ASM. Obviously we're doing this, we're seeing some of the disadvantages of that, or maybe we're not seeing the disadvantages yet. I'm sure we will. Advantages, we can now have these meetings with a larger group because not everyone needs to fly there. But anyway, yeah, it's been quite good, quite strong, impressive how well, certainly the technical committee where I'm working, but across CIOOS, how we're really, actively and regularly interacting and working together.
Well, thanks, Lorraine. That's a good reminder, how recent this all has been, right? So if we're talking, early 2019, we're just, a year and 3 quarters into active CIOOS. So a lot of what we're hearing today obviously is impressive in that regard in terms of how far things have come. So Denis and Shayla, anything else to add with regard to then progress to date?
Yeah, Martin, this is Denis, and certainly I agree with all those comments from Anne-Sophie and Ray, and to relate the conversation specifically to the 3 recommendations from the report in the CCA. From a vision gap perspective, I think the common language in Canada of the GOOS strategic objective, I think over the last 7 years it has become more known, more understood. And I think that there's been some progress there in using the framework for ocean observing system and its evolution into the GOOS 2030 strategy as the basis for our understanding of where we want to go with our observing system. So I would say that there's been some progress there. And also part of the vision, I think, would also include in my mind the recognition that there's more than a few departments doing ocean observation in Canada. There's all sorts of agencies and NGOs, and that certainly has blossomed over the last 7 years. And in the 3 presentations, we've seen them mentioned in several places. In terms of coordination gap, I don't think that anything like CIOOS existed 7 years ago. Like from my narrow perspective of Pacific, having people from ONC, HACI, and DFO in the same room, working on the same data had never happened. So that's a start. And from an information point of view, I'm going to be very specific there. I have an extremely narrow example of an advance, a recent advance, but I find it's very penetrating. And it's, you know, Martin, in the report, there were 22 questions put forward that should inform where ocean science in Canada should go. And question number 21 was calling for the investigation of trends in fundamental ocean parameters, question 21. And I have to say that on the basis of the work that was done at the Institute of Ocean Sciences, and I believe that the work on the translation of the DFO files that Jonathan alluded to earlier and transforming them to NetCDF files, that allowed some analysis of the trends on line P, and that was published a month ago by Cummins and Ross. And if you Google secular trends in water properties, just these words, secular trends in water properties, you will arrive at an article that reviews in depth all those trends from the 50s in line P. And that is a major accomplishment. It's very narrow, but it's response specifically to one of the questions in the report.
Okay, thanks very much, Denis. Shayla, anything else to add on this one?
Yeah, I think Anne-Sophie and Ray and Denis have really covered our progress and the vision and coordination. But I just wanted to add to the information gap highlighted in the CCA report. Anne-Sophie talked a lot about how outreach and engagement are very important for us. We're looking to build a system by the ocean science community that's for the ocean science community. And so input on that is very important. And what that helps us do is not only develop a system that integrates and makes available ocean research data, it also helps provide information about the scale and the scope of the ocean research that's being done in Canada. So you can see what projects are being carried out and what types of data they're generating. It also, on a slightly smaller scale, allows us as members of CIOOS to share the information we're learning by doing outreach and engagement. So I know in CIOOS Atlantic, we've had a number of instances where we had a conversation with a particular group and said, oh, hey, well, this other group is doing something similar, you should connect, to really help not just understand all the different activities that are going on, but to reduce duplication of effort as well.
Thank you. And what I'm conscious of, I think, as each of you are speaking, is the base on which CIOOS was able to build, not just in terms of data, but in terms of people. And this is where an organization like MEOPAR, for example, I think has been so important in bringing folks together in ways that there was common ground and common understanding, that CIOOS then gets a jump start in a certain way because some of those natural collaborations had already been formed. And that's always an important ingredient, I think, as one thinks about the connections between establishing a big research platform of the sort that CIOOS represents and how that is complemented by the person scientist-based organization that a MEOPAR or other NCEs and similar organizations represent. There's a real complementarity there. So let's turn attention then from what has been achieved in a relatively short period of time, obviously, to what then one would identify as some of the major challenges going forward in the very immediate future. So Ray, I'll turn to you to start off on that one, and then again, we can have others contribute. And I'll keep my eye on the time so that we're not exhausting all of the time and leave some time for questions that may have come in. But Ray, challenges ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think I will put my technical hat on. I'll focus on some of the technical challenges, and maybe a fellow panelists might have something to say about other things. An observation would be, if you go back to the first presentation, I have this great map with all the other USAs, and that's great. An observation is that we kind of came late to the party in some ways, and there's an advantage to coming late to the party in that, you know, the dance is already happening and things are going, and things that people have figured things out. From a technical perspective, that means that a lot of the standards tools, all these things that allow these systems to be interoperable, and how we encode data and store data and transfer data. That stuff was figured out, a lot of it, by the other OOSs. So it's figured out by CIOOS or the EuroGoose or IMOS. So we were able to basically, if we talk to our US CIOOS technical colleagues, they say, that's great. You can basically leapfrog a lot of stuff that we had to do for the last 20 years and figure out. So that was sort of an observation of a really good thing. If I think about a challenge moving forward is, we're on a level playing field sort of when it comes to some other, and that was with certain data types, like a lot of physical and chemical data types. But if I look towards biological or genomic data types, we're sort of on a level playing field with everyone else. And it's an area where genomics for sure, and a lot of the biological data where the standards don't really exist yet, or they exist, but people haven't really adopted it yet. So they haven't gone through the iterative cycle of, being hardened and being ready for real-time use. So I think the challenges are to sort of, work with our other colleagues, international colleagues and others, to help define those standards and systems and technologies that help can be applied in biological data and genomic data and model forecast data and all those sort of things, and how to adopt those things and adopt them in a way in an evolving, changing landscape sort of thing. So it's something that data stewardship, we're pretty passionate about, and that's where we're helping CIOOS do that, because a lot of our time, certainly phase one was focused on these 7 EOVs, these standard EOVs that are fairly well defined. As we look towards the future, we would have loved to do more, but there's only so much you can do in so much time with so much funding. So we were able to carve off a way to look a little bit towards that. And then now, as everyone else is coming in, looking at those things, we're a little more prepared. So keeping on that, that trajectory of making sure, and not going down rabbit holes, because, in this thing where things are evolving quickly and changing quickly, you can quickly go down the wrong path and waste a lot of time and resources. So I think that's going to be a challenge moving forward. It's not a bad challenge. It's kind of exciting, new areas, new data types, and that sort of thing. But it is going to be a technical challenge. So I'll pause there.
Thanks. Excellent points, Ray. Shaylo, any comment from you on challenges going forward?
So to build on to Ray's points about the data and the variables that aren't yet mature, where we are on a level playing field, it does present challenges. And if we decide to integrate those variables into CIOOS, there might come a time in the future where we have to change the way they're displayed or what kind of data is included with them in our system to match best practices as they evolve. So integrating them now can be considered a form of technical debt, but I think it's also important to not miss out on important work that's being done because of that reason, so that keeping up to date with those standards and transforming any data that's already in the system as standards evolve will certainly be a challenge moving forward. But there's also the engagement side and outreach side. There are so many researchers as individual academics at universities and organizations, NGOs, industry partners, Indigenous communities and organizations who are doing really fantastic ocean research. And to reach out to all of them and to connect with all of them is a challenge, just because there's so many, and we want to talk to everyone, but there's so many people that it's difficult to include everyone, and we do encourage people to please contact us as well. We'd be very, very happy to talk to you.
That's a great point. And Sophie, and then I'm going to turn to Denis, but with a different question. So, and Sophie, on challenges ahead.
Yeah, so maybe in 2 points. The first is being, it's hard to find a balance between what we've just discussed, between making data still discoverable and findable, because it exists, it has been researched, it has been collected, it's been funds dedicated to them, and having difficult barriers to integrate them at CIOOS is a challenge in itself. I mean, like Shayla said, we want to talk to everybody, we want to have data from everybody in our portal, but at the same time, we want to make sure that it's quality data, that we can make use of it. And for that, to make it searchable, even, we need to have some level of standardization from them. So that's a really hard balance, and it's a challenge for ahead in the fields that are less curated, like Ray mentioned, for biological data, for example. And the second part that I wanted to mention is one thing that we need to do now is to develop a reflex in the mind of every Canadian scientist working with data. As soon as you collect data, you have to think, hey, I should put this on CIOOS. And if you want data, you should search on CIOOS. And if it's not there, hopefully it's there, but if it's not there, hopefully you can contact us and make pressure to make that data available. And we want to know, it's good input as well to know that you couldn't find what you were looking for on our portal. So yeah, that's it.
Excellent. Denise, as a natural segue, I think, between thinking about the challenges ahead and thinking about other models that are out there. You made reference already to our international colleagues. And obviously we are aware of GOOS, we're aware of IOOS, we're aware of IMOS and European Ventures and so on. So take us there if you could, and comment initially, and again, I'll look to others to comment as well. You know, what models are in place internationally that can help to inform the way forward in Canada, do you think?
Yes, Martin, to inform the way forward, I'll highlight in a few minutes some differences and similarities between existing ocean observing models. One in the States, the IOOS, and one in Australia, the IMOS, and our own here in Canada, CIOOS, from the perspective of the framework, the governance, and the funding.
Okay.
So for the framework, well, it's reassuring to realize that those observing systems that have been in operation for 20 years in the case of the US and 14 years in the case of Australia, they were developed and predicated on the framework for ocean observing system that flowed from Oceanops in 2009, which was later implemented by GOOS, and which became the base of the recently released GOOS Strategic Plan 2030. So Canada intends to become a regional alliance, and that's one of the justifications for launching CIOOS. And we included parlance related to the GOOS 2030 strategy in our proposal for phase 2. So from a framework point of view, we are well aligned with the international colleagues. And I'm just focusing on 2 here, but of course, if you went to France and Japan, it would be the same. So we're all aligned in that respect. But that's the end of the similarities. Now, if we go to the governance now, in Australia, in 2016, 7 parties entered into a principal participant agreement, a very formal agreement between the various players. And it's like a contract. It's called an unincorporated joint venture. And the signatories there. And what's interesting is that the signatories include, of course, several universities, but also several federal agencies. It's a collective effort between federal agencies of the government of Australia. And the governing board is led by an independent chair, and is responsible for the governance of IMOS. Now, in the United States, IOOS is governed by an act, actually an act that was signed off by President Obama in 2009 or something like that. So it's an executive order that mandates NOAA to create an IOOS program nationally that will support and fund all the 11 regional associations. So the governance is rooted in an act that is part of the Constitution, and it's all concentrated or applied via the highly integrated NOAA office through the IOOS national office to the regional associations. Now in Canada, from a governance point of view, I guess what we can say is that we are governed by the sum of the regional, the terms of reference of our respective regional oversight committees, the terms of reference of our national CIOOS executive committee, although I don't remember seeing them, and also by the informal relationship that we have during our various meetings and transactions. So all this to say that we have some elements of governance in Canada, but compared to what exists in other countries, They are certainly at the more prototype stage, which is consistent with the fact that we've been in existence for 22 months, not 2 decades.
Right.
But what I want to highlight is that in well-established organizations such as IMOS and CIOOS, there is a strong degree of formalized interagency collaboration. And by interagency, I mean the various entities within the federal machinery that are responsible for various aspects of the boost strategy. And perhaps this is one aspect that is not that is yet to be formally developed and enhanced in Canada. The last final point, Martin, I promise, it's on the funding. In Australia, IMOS is funded by the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. That's a program to which such projects as IMOS may apply. And Australia, IMOS has received $50 billion during its 5 years, first 5 years. So that recall that in Australian dollars, Canadian dollars about 1.1, so that's about $45 million Canadian over the 5 years for real establishment. And then it's sort of floating at something like $18 million per year. That's the current level in Australia. In the United States, the presidential budget for CIOOS in 2020 is in the amount of $45 million US dollars. So that's close to 55 or so Canadian dollars. And similar levels of funding are expected for the next 5-year funding cycle, which is currently underway. While in Canada for CIOOS, well, the total envelope for phase 2 of CIOOS is up to $1.7 million. That includes the DFO contribution and the MEOPAR contribution, and also a certain amount of direct support from the Hawkeye Institute. So I think these comparisons may serve to for us to see, well, what could be done and how we can find a Canadian solution for these aspects related to governance, particularly as pertains to interagency collaboration and the stability and predictability of funding.
So that's a nice segue to the last question I was going to ask, and I was going to ask Shayla to kick it off. But before I do that, I see we've got a couple of questions in the chat box, and let's entertain those, and we'll go for short answers because we've just got about 7 or so minutes left, and I just want to make sure we get to that last question and build on what Denise's already said. But Casey, over to you with those couple of questions you have there.
Great. Well, the first question is from Jean Holloway, and it is, what are the plans for the Arctic RA, and where can we get more information?
So who would like very quickly to say how that issue is going to be addressed? Arctic RA.
I will comment just on the, it was on one of the initial slides. So Arctic IA was certainly there, intending to be there, is not there, from what I understand, partially because of a scope of within phase 1 scope and funding. There may be other reasons as well. On the, I know within the data stewardship nodes, we're working sort of at a grassroots level with the Arctic RA on helping some groups that are working within the Arctic, not essentially the Arctic RA doesn't exist yet, but some groups, CCADI particularly, to help transform some of their Arctic oceanographic data into CIOOS compliant forms. So we're working with them the intention that when the to get the technical background work ready for the Arctic RA to actually come online. When it actually comes, I don't know. I can't answer it. Not in the place to answer whether that's a phase 3 or whether whenever there's, I guess, funding and opportunity for that to happen. So
thanks.
I don't know if other panels have anything.
Anybody else want to add a quick comment? Shayla?
Yeah, I just wanted to add onto what Ray was saying is that but we can't comment on when that might happen yet. We have been, as he said, doing some outreach to organizations who are already doing some really fantastic work in the Arctic. We want to work with everyone. Like we don't want to take over work in the Arctic as CIOOS. We want to work with the organizations that are already doing fantastic work in the region. And so we've started conversations and started working with some of those organizations in preparation for the Arctic RA.
So I see, Casey, that we've got a second question from our good friend and colleague, Helen Joseph, that I think in part Denis has dealt with, but just pose the question and see if there's anything that we quickly want to add to it.
Sure. The question is, how does CIOOS fit within the global ocean observing system? Does the appointment of a Canadian, Dr. Anya White, as a new co-lead of the Goose Steering Committee have any impact on CIOOS? Example, greater expectations.
Denis, back to you, since you were basically talking to the issue.
Yeah, at my regional level, I have not the impact of Canadian as co-chair has not yet echoed at my national level. Regional level. But certainly, if we continue to promote CIOOS as if we continue to focus on one of CIOOS's objective to provide Canada with a membership as a global alliance, a regional global alliance, certainly that the nomination of a Canadian as co-chair would facilitate what I recall of the diplomacy around IOC in Paris relies on such opportunities, and there's certainly is one right there.
Shayla, I'm going to go to you with the final question, and previous comments have kind of anticipated it, but you can kick us off. What investments, whether that's in terms of governance that we've heard something about, management that we've heard something about, and resources that we've heard something about, might be required to sustain the effort and achieve further success going forward for CIOOS? So Shayla, over to you.
So really, the greatest investment we need to sustain CIOOS moving forward, that all comes back to human resource capital. We need people. They're our greatest resource. They're the backbone of the work that we do. And Martin, as you referred to earlier, they are the driving force behind how CIOOS even came into existence. We need people to help manage and coordinate the national aspects of CIOOS, or though we do have a number of committees and task teams, we all have not only these national task teams, but we have our regional interests that we need to advance. And so sometimes it can be a bit of a juggling act to manage all and coordinate all of that. So someone at the national level to help us with that coordination and to help move forward some of our national initiatives. We need people on the ground who are engaging with our stakeholders, with people who are collecting and using ocean data and helping to spread the word about CIOOS and to help integrate data into CIOOS. We need people who are knowledgeable about data management to help work with our stakeholders to get data into the system. And above and beyond all that, a very important and significant aspect is involvement from the Canadian oceanographic community from all sectors to work with and to use CIOOS. Our success will really come from people working with and using CIOOS, putting data into the system that will allow the community to look at what's been done, to advance their own ocean research, to contribute more to CIOOS, and it becomes a circle that builds off each other and creates success within the ocean research community.
And Sophie, would you like to add in the minute or so that remains any comment to that excellent commentary from Shayla?
I think that the future will bring us a lot of help in that regard, because more and more in planification of research, there's always a component of making the data, well, more and more there's a component of making the data available in the end of it. And I think it's just a matter of time that CIOOS will become, like I said before, the reflex, the entry point of, okay, well, right, in my data management plan, there's funding that will be allocated for making sure that there's resources, both technical and financial, for achieving that. So I'm pretty confident that the future years will really jumpstart the data composition of CIOOS.
Well, I want to thank you all. I mean, clearly we're touching the surface, as one always does in a short session like this. But I must admit, I mean, from my own perspective, having obviously invested quite a bit of my own time earlier on to these issues, I'm very encouraged by what I'm hearing that has been happening in a relatively short time. At the same time, I think we're at an absolutely critical juncture in terms of ensuring that what has been achieved thus far through CIOOS finds its way into through those doors of government and indeed through the doors of our research agencies, so that the resources that are going to be needed to sustain this will be there. That's not guaranteed. And I think the value propositions that you've all presented through both the pre-tape presentations as well as your comments become critical. And so when you talk, as you did, Shayla, about the importance of human capital, that human capital also translates into champions. Who is going to champion CIOOS going forward? Obviously building on the very strong evidence base that you've all been so centrally involved in helping to create. So I congratulate you on what you've achieved. I thank you for today, and I thank our audience for participating. And I'll pass it back to our coordinators with my sincere thanks, and thank you for the privilege of sitting with you in our respective offices and homes today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Martin.
I'd like to thank all the attendees for participating in today's CIOOS session. And I will now turn the mic over to Paul, who will take the lead for the remainder of the session.